Hello and welcome to another episode of Father and Joe. I am Joe Rockey here with Father Boniface Hicks. And Father, we discussed 2 weeks ago about how this is a Jubilee of Hope and how we are called to have hope. And we dove into that episode about kind of what hope means. We discussed little hopes and big hopes being rooted in Christ. And in the last episode, we discussed how to have habits and how it's normal to have habits and to constantly try to work and practice to be a holier life. And one thing that I think, probably because I'm the one who comes up with the topics and I might be lacking in this department, I think that we don't discuss enough is how to intertwine communicating not just with God, but also with Mary into our daily practices and how to go about that and how it's so important. I know that we've had different episodes in similar topics that maybe I'm just not capable of understanding or wasn't in that moment or whatever. But the notion of going through something and giving it up to God, I missed the core concept on, and I think I might also be missing the core concept on devotions to Mary. So I wanted to use this episode again as we're fresh in the beginning of the Jubilee of Hope, knowing that Mary is the mother of God, that she's probably a pretty good person to ask for when we're in these spots of despair or not believing in hope. And I wanted to just go there and know that you're the expert.
Yeah, well, certainly developing a relationship with Our Lady is a really important part of our spiritual life. God knew we would need a mother, and so He provided a perfect one for us, in addition to the one that He provided for us in our conception and own birth. So Mary does a great deal for us in helping us along the way, and she is also one of her titles is Mother of Holy Hope, and she certainly does help us to have hope. She made the Holocaust of faith and hope at the foot of the cross as she watched her son dying and hoped beyond hope that this was somehow not the end. And we are building on 2,000 years of the resurrection, and that might seem more obvious to us, but she didn't have any context for that. So it was really, and as much as she knew at some level he was God, her daily experience is that he was very human. And so being able to constantly see that in faith and be able to place the weight of her life on that in hope is the real example for us. And then having walked that path, she's the one who can really keep helping us to walk that path. So I think you're absolutely right that turning to Our Lady is a great source of hope, and certainly the mysteries of the Rosary are a beautiful way to do that. And even just to offer one decade of the Rosary, and Our Father, 10 Hail Marys, a Glory Be, and just focus on one of those mysteries to try and see the life of Christ through the eyes of Mary, and then steadily what we do is we start to see our own life through the eyes of Mary and how our life is coordinated with that of Christ. And so when I like the mystery of the wedding feast at Cana, for example, where Mary paid attention to the needs of the wedding couple and she interceded on their behalf. And we could say, well, Mary, you know what I need. You're able to see, you're sensitive to what I need. I don't even know what I need. The wedding couple didn't know what they needed. They didn't even know that they needed. But Mary saw it and she interceded for it. And so we can ask her that way for our own lives as well. A lot of times anxiety is specifically anxiety because it doesn't have a specific object to it. We're just afraid of something generically bad happening, maybe around some particular event or challenge in our lives. But it's not like I have a specific object to my fear, being attacked by a bear or something like that. It's a general sense of something going wrong or something coming apart. And so just being able to ask Our Lady, for example, you see the situation, you know what I need, please intercede for me. And if I need to know what I need, please show me. And that can be a real source of consolation to say her name, to draw into her presence. And then I think a lot of us have personal experience or even kind of secondhand experience, seeing a little child being held by his or her mother, and we have that sense of protection and consolation, the being enveloped in that maternal care, and we can have a real longing around that in our own hearts. And that's another way we can draw close to her. A lot of times when we feel overwhelmed or we feel hopeless, we also feel powerless. And that goes together with feeling little, like a child. Children are very powerless. And so imagining ourselves as a little child in those more powerless moments, well, Mary is the one who takes care of little children. So we can imagine that childlike part of us being drawn into her embrace and feeling her motherly care. And that can be a great consolation in a moment in a time of powerlessness. Um, and then we can also ask her to help us walk the path. She's the one who really stayed with Jesus through the hardest times. She didn't abandon him on the way of the cross. She remained at the foot of the cross, and probably is what gave courage even for the other women and for John to remain with Jesus at the foot of the cross. And so Our Lady has a strength to her that in very hard times, crucifying times, in our own passion, she's the one who can really walk with us, stay with us, and help us to navigate this hard place in our lives. And so in that too, we can find hope in her. So just a couple of examples of how Our Lady can strengthen us in hope, how we can come to her in prayer and experience her motherhood.
Yeah, and I think of just, I mean, obviously I have a 3-year-old, so I think of how many times, and I hope that this all correlates and makes sense together. But I think of how Jesus said you have to act like a child, look through the eyes of a child to be able to understand and be with God. And I look at how, I believe it was the reading last week. It was like what, the week after Christmas, I think, when Jesus stays in Jerusalem. She's coming back in the safety of her family to avoid, the challenges of the journey. Essentially, um, abandons all the safety of her group to go back to the city that she's not from, search around it, and it takes 3 days. And I'm sure she just wasn't like looking and then sitting down and going to the bar and hoping he turns up, but actually actively looking and searching all over for 3 days, which shows it's probably a pretty big city and all in. And then finally finding him. And well, yes, addressing the fact that I'm feeling some stuff here, but not unloading upon him, not trying to change him, not trying to do any of that stuff, but actually accepting Jesus when he was a child at this point for what it is that he was doing, recognizing that even though I went through suffering by not seeing you, I'm not going to take it out, because at the end of the day, you didn't do anything wrong. You still were doing something right. I would have preferred you to have done something different. Um, and in a certain sense, it's a very trivial difference, but I would prefer you to have become an accounting major instead of a marketing major or something like that. Like, it's just a difference there. But the fact that she also went through all of the things in life of following Jesus later on, and hearing and seeing all of the negativity that people were putting upon him, as well as the positivity. Like, there's no way she wasn't affected by the Pharisees trying to mess up Jesus to try to get him arrested. I think that it's one of the best segment of parables that you get from Mark, when the Pharisees are calling him out and he keeps bringing up different parables of how they're wrong. But she's there feeling that tension of, this person's trying to get my son murdered, and I can know he's doing that. And I'm not going to basically disobey God to get in the way of that. I'm going to do it correctly. And she saw him have skin knees. She saw him get all the goods as well, all the positives. Sure, she's seen him make things that, in terms of beyond just the miracles, but physically make things as a carpenter that made people's lives better, whatever the tools or furniture he was making at the time. So I bring this all up in saying that there's such a broader view of what Mary would have gone through and seen in a complete totality, rather than just what, for instance, St. Peter would have seen, who just showed up in the ministry part. And these are the thoughts that were going through my head here as I was thinking and preparing for this episode, and how how much that's challenging to try to look through his eyes, because quite frankly, I don't even think I know how to look through a mother's eyes. I just see how much different me and my wife are looking at our son. And to me, that's a mystery beyond mysteries in some regards. And to just know that, good, bad, or ugly, she was willing to do what was right, even if it's not what other people thought would have been right. Because there's plenty of people that would have intervened in some capacity, and some would have made it about them in one way or another, either to be the superhero trying to get those Pharisees arrested, or some trying to go the opposite direction, make themselves a super victim because, oh, everyone tries to get after my kid. And we know all kinds of people that go both ways throughout the world. And she gave us a direction through the most extreme stress you could have, of how to live a graceful life. And like I said, I just wanted to spend a moment there during this year of hope to contemplate and think about that.
No, those are beautiful thoughts. And I think the connection with your own son is also an important one to make. I mean, in some sense, every child reminds us of the child Jesus. Every baby reminds us of the baby Jesus. And there's a real connection there. Jesus didn't start walking when he was 3 days old or something like that. He didn't behave differently than a human infant, a human child, and so the icon of a mother loving a child, as you are looking at your wife doing, is the icon for us to focus our attention on. How does she love him? How does she care for him? How does she attend to him? And that's those really stimulate our reflections with Jesus, with Mary and Jesus. And so, yeah, what was in her heart towards him when she saw him at every stage in his life? Mary's the one who, I don't even know what they did for diapers in those days, but whatever the equivalent of changing his diapers is, and there's obviously this incredible intimacy that Mary had with him that was so unique. And as you say, I mean, looking at his life, and it's yeah, it's hard to imagine how. I mean, he was he was probably not remarkable beyond the perfection of charity. So he wasn't working miracles. He wasn't floating. He wasn't all knowing. He was really human. And so over the course of 30 years, for Mary never to lose sight of who he really is as God is also incredible to think about, and the ways that she might have remembered that, and maybe moments that his love was so significant that even brought it a little bit more to the forefront of her attention, of her mind. But yeah, it's amazing to think about their relationship. And Saint Paul VI on the Office of Readings for the Feast of the Holy Family, there's a homily that he gave when he made a papal visit to Nazareth, and he talks about entering into the school of Nazareth, that we can place ourselves there and learn from the Holy Family the virtues of family life. And it's a beautiful reflection that he offers. But the idea of Nazareth as a school that we can learn from, that we can enter into there, and the way that Mary and Jesus and Joseph love each other, work together, live together, the conversations that they have, the way that they pray together, worship together, the way that they visit others, receive others in hospitality, you know, all of that is the kind of perfection of love, perfection of family life. And so it's a beautiful way to learn from them. And of course, we do that, through our best effort, through our imagination, and through making the connections with our own family life. We always do it a little bit. I always think of that with open hands. We don't sort of definitively say, Joseph definitely had a carpentry accident. Mary definitely came running to help him. Jesus was definitely, it's like, oh, who knows? But it looks something like our life. And so we always have that starting point to reflect on it. The big difference is the perfection of love. There was perfect love in that home. And what does that look like? What would your life look like if everybody in your home loved perfectly and you love well? What's the difference between well and perfect? And those are beautiful reflections to have, and great ways to learn from Mary and Joseph and Jesus and their family life and their home in Nazareth.
Yeah, and like I said, I think that it's absolutely amazing the way that you go about that. It's one of the pluses and minuses of the Gospels is that they're not novels the way they're written today that get very granular in the details. You don't get from a parent perspective of one of her siblings telling her she's doing it wrong in whatever the capacity it is, the way you make bread, the way you're teaching him the language, the pace in which you're teaching him. He should have been potty trained by now. He should be walking by now, or whatever the case may be that you see parents go through. And I know that this is just giving the example of the little kid version, but the whole thing's equivalent to every age. You should be of having your kids at this point or that point. And I highly doubt that that's an invention of our times. I think that's a very human nature thing to be commenting upon how everyone else does things. I see it in far too many people for to not think it's part of humanity. So, which means it's something that she would have dealt with. And to see the confidence within herself and her family that we are doing it right, and how to deal with essentially the outside world in all of its various capacities, positive, negative, and neutral. And I think that that's, like I said, you just gave a great answer there of sitting and reflecting upon what it would have been. And I think that if you do it in a prayerful state, that you will be guided in a way that's probably pretty accurate. Again, there's no video recording like this is the real world. And we got camera angles from 13 different elements so we can catch everything that they did. That's obviously not how life is. But I do believe that you'll be guided in a way that shows an element of what that perfect love could have been by sitting and reflecting. And your action steps there of doing a decade of the Rosary and thinking about Mary in the context of which you gave the example of one of the mysteries, but I'd venture to say also do whatever is in your world right now that you're thinking or contemplating about, whether it be as an individual, as a parent, or whatever, and knowing that she'll be there because she's there for us all. So we thank everyone for being with us here today in this episode. We will be with you again next week. We hope you have a great week.